Welcome to the Weather Insights live stream. This is Thursday afternoon, September 26th. We are tracking now major Hurricane Helene. I've gone a few other things going out in the tropics. Just want to cover those real quick. We've got newly formed tropical storm Isaac, which is basically going to be a fish storm, move off to the east, only affecting shipping lanes. And then south of Isaac, we have disturbance number one. High chance of development, will likely become our next named storm as it moves off to the west-northwest. And then this new yellow hatched area is disturbance number two that has a 20% chance of development over the next 7 days. Of course, all the focus is on Helene, which is expected to make landfall later this evening as it tracks toward the Big Bend area of Florida. Obviously, hurricane warnings in effect for that area, and then tropical storm warnings really for almost the entire state of Florida, except for that real small area in the Panhandle. And now the tropical storm warnings all the way around to the Georgia and South Carolina coast. You can see the track where it ends up. Really, just a bit over 24 hours from now, Jeff, that storm is going to be in central Tennessee. So still tracking fast. And man, look at the wind field on this thing. That is it really just covering the entire state of Florida, except for the Panhandle area. And now looking very impressive on satellite. That eye is looking a lot cleaner, I guess, although it's still going through some development, but it is looking a lot cleaner in the bands. It's, very large organized storm as you would expect with a major hurricane as it heads on track there. And, right now, track intensity, all that seems to be verifying, Jeff.
Yep, it's unfortunately it's doing what we thought it was going to do, and that was, the strengthening this morning was a little more gradual. But in the last hour and a half or so, we've seen a fairly significant drop in the pressure, 7 millibars in about 90 minutes, from 959 down to 952. Still a little bit of a lopsided wind field here. You can see the purple and whites over here on the east or right side of it. That's the strongest winds, and more of the greens and blues on the west side. So the big push and really strong winds here on the east side of the circulation. You can see the Florida coast here. These really strong winds are just scraping by the metro Tampa Bay area. We'll take a look at some of the surface observations there in a minute. But this is heading right up. Here's Appalachia Bay, and you can see this big push of really high wind that's going to be coming up to the bay, and that's going to be forcing that water. It's coming. Here in the next 6 hours or so, this big surge is coming. We haven't seen a lot of water level rise today on the coast. We've been in low tide. I'm going to skip ahead real quick and look at the surface obs. And you can see right off the coast here, these are buoys right here off the southwest and west Florida coast, frequent 60 plus mile an hour gusts, even 54 now getting up here towards the south side of Appalachia Bay. We go in here in the Tampa Bay area, all the red numbers are the current wind gusts. So we're easily gusting 40, 50, 60 miles an hour down here. I think this is Venice, or no, this is Sarasota. So we're getting the tropical storm force winds, at least in gust, and we have had some sustained 50 or so around Tampa Bay, even over here on the East Coast, 43 at West Palm, 40 at Boca Raton. So we're getting the tropical storm wind field that's kind of verifying here. Interestingly enough, I know it's kind of colored up here. We haven't seen any of that yet on the land up in this region, but this is where it's coming, and it's coming fast. And so we're gonna have to keep a really close eye on this tonight. Unfortunately, just looking at the satellite here, 120 now, I believe. I don't think there was any changes at 4 o'clock. 120, 100 and 125, 130 as it comes up here. There's still 6-8 hours before this reaches the coast. Is certainly possible. And again, this is a big wind field. If you look at this is hurricane force winds here in the darker red, extending outward about 60-65 miles. Tropical storm force winds extending outward 340 miles. So we're talking an Ike-sized storm, but stronger. So Ike, when it made landfall, was around 110 miles an hour. This will be 120, 125, 130 on the table. You say, oh, that's not that much. That's 20 miles an hour. But when you're talking at those wind speeds, that's dramatic with respect to the damage potential as this comes inland. And it's going to to bring those strong winds well inland across the southeast United States. I mean, look at this.
Yeah,
For sustained 40-mile-an-hour winds, now the probability 90% across virtually the entire state of Georgia.
right.
We're talking all the way up here, western North Carolina, southern Tennessee, western South Carolina, sustained winds of 40 miles per hour, 90% or greater. So this is going to be some very significant inland wind event with this storm with the fast forward motion. So you're going to have damage all through the center into the northern part of Georgia. Again, this is on wet grounds. It's been raining all day, flooding happening all through here. We'll take a look at that in a minute. Storm surge, we've been harping on this. I don't know what else there is to say. It's coming. Your maximum push of water in the next 6 hours or so is coming up here to the north and northeast side of Appalachia Bay, and it's going to be horrible. Really probably from about St. Mark's, Florida, over to Cedar Key. That maximum push is coming in there, and it's going to be rough, and that's going to be coming with big wave action into a very shallow area, very shallow bay, concave shape here. You just couldn't set up it any more perfect for a maximum surge production here in the northeast part of Appalachia Bay. Again, this will be a record event. Most of the records here are held by the March '93 superstorm, not a tropical system, and just goes to show how rare a tropical system of this magnitude is in this part of Florida. There's been tropical storms and hurricanes here, but not to this level. And so this is going to be a very significant coastal event. The silver lining, if there is any, is there's not a lot of population in here. There are certainly structures here. Unfortunately, a lot of these structures are older, built back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. A lot of them are on the ground. And when you start talking storm surge of this value, most of them are not going to survive this. And so, you got to get out. I mean, we've been saying this now for 2 days. You have to get out of these areas. And this is the absolute last moment that you have to get out. We've seen the coastal flooding start to take over some of the low-lying evacuation routes today. So the time is running out for you to get out. And as this comes in tonight, your only option is going to be to get up. You're going to have to get as high as you can possibly get in whatever structure you're in, or whatever sturdy structures around. You're going to have to get as high as you can possibly get to effectively save your life.
Yeah.
This is going to be over your head seawater flooding with big waves. We're going to show you a camera here in a second how fast the water's flowing. This isn't pool water. This isn't just sitting water. This is fast moving water with wave action and all kinds of debris. And you're gonna have to get as high as you can possibly get if you can't get out of here, or chose not to get out, because if right now you gotta go. You've got to get out of these areas.
Yeah, no, those live camera shots that you mentioned too, Jeff. We're going to have some bridges. There you go, right there. And some of these bridges, frankly, I'm surprised they're not impassable now. I mean, you see the waves crashing over them, but they will soon be, if not already, impassable. But yeah, that's just incredible.
Yeah,
Trying
this bridge down here in the right is
is
down
that
in
Fort
southwest.
Myers?
Yeah, this is down in the Fort Myers
Yeah,
area. I know exactly where this is at. We did the Ian storm surge survey, and I know this bridge right here, and you can not only see the wave action pounding on the one side, but notice on the other side of the bridge the water flowing through
yeah,
that bridge opening, and that is that storm surge flowing in. And you and I were looking at this just a minute ago. Up here at the top right is
yeah,
the Howard Franklin Bridge in Tampa, and look at the visibility now is just completely gone.
yeah.
They must be getting a squall or something coming through. But
Yeah. And
you
just,
know,
I mean, in less than an hour ago, Jeff, we talked about it too. I saw cars crossing the bridge. It's just insane that that bridge is still open. Hopefully nobody's on it right now, but, or, hopefully they're going to be closing it soon, but that just looks very dangerous.
yeah,
And
and
that's
this
Tampa Bay.
this sort of gives you the idea of things are fine, and then they're just not. And
Right.
and 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 I cannot stress enough how quickly this water is going to come up on the coast. It is going to come up like a fire hose. It is going to come up very quickly. I don't know how many surveys I've done, post-storm surveys, where I've talked to people, and the first thing out of their mouth is, "I'll never do this again." And I was surprised by how quickly the water came up. And we're talking 6, 8 feet of water level rise in an hour or an hour and a half. And once the roads are cut off, that's it. You cannot get out. And so you can literally see in this bottom photo or this bottom video feed here, the water flowing in. That water's flowing into the inland, into the bays, past the barrier islands. And all of that water is going to eventually have to rise vertically. It can't keep flowing inland because the land rises. And so, if we had an image up at Cedar Key, I'm sure it'd be showing, certainly wave action now. The
Yep.
maximum push of water hadn't quite got up towards that area of Florida yet, but boy, when it comes, it's going to come in. And like I said, look at the wave action. I
Yeah.
mean, just from the camera shot, you're probably looking at least 4 feet there, striking that bridge approach, maybe a little bit higher. And so it's not just the water, it's those big waves. And
Yeah.
when you go to the beach and stand in 2 feet, 2 or 3 feet of waves, and it moves you around, imagine 6 or 8 or 10 foot waves striking a structure,
Yeah.
striking a house or striking a building. It isn't going to survive that. It's not going to survive
Mhm.
this.
And we've seen bridges just collapse under this kind of pressure. And again, I just keep going back to it, but these cars crossing, it's just amazing. In the Tampa Bay, it's getting a little bit more visible, but still, still a mess there.
Yeah. So I did want to mention the inland flood threat.
Mhm.
This is the secondary severe issue that's going to happen with Helene. So obviously tonight we're going to deal with the really strong winds and the big storm surge in Florida. But you can see this area, these purple boxes up here in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, western South Carolina. That is major flooding on the rivers, and there's been some very, very strong statements put out by the National Weather Service today around the Asheville area that this is potentially record, never before seen flooding, freshwater inland flooding in this area. So, anticipating an additional 8 to 10 inches of rain on what they've already seen in the past day or so, 9 inches or so around Asheville. So, we could be
Yeah.
approaching 2 day totals of 20 inches
Hmm.
in these mountains. And there is going to be absolutely devastating flooding in western North Carolina, western South Carolina, northeastern Georgia, and eastern Tennessee. And this will go Friday into Friday night to some degree. And I pulled this up. So each one of these dots on here is a river gauge or a tide gauge. And so I wanted to kind of pull up some of the tide gauges and see what we're looking at around the Tampa Bay area. So you can see we're actually heading toward low tide now in
Yeah.
the Tampa Bay area. That's helping. But unfortunately, as the hurricane passes to the west and the north, that maximum push of water is going to come in at the high tide tonight. You can see Clearwater Beach on the Gulf of Mexico there. The steep rise is starting. So they were down around a foot. They're now up around 2 feet. So that water level rise, that push of water is certainly starting there on the Gulf Coast. Let's go up and check Cedar Key and see what Cedar Key's doing. They're still in kind of a tide minimum right now, but you can see the tide minimum should be down,
Right.
should be way down here.
Yep.
So you're already running about 2 feet of surge up at Cedar Key,
Hmm.
and that's going to go nowhere but up over the
Hmm.
next 8 6 8 hours or so. Let's check Shell Point. Shell
Same
Point
thing.
up here, they're still going
Hmm.
down at the tide minimum, but not as much. I mean, they're having some surge over there, which you would expect with the easterly winds up here piling the water on the west side of the bay right now. Again, as
Hmm.
the center comes up, the winds will switch from easterly in the bay to southwesterly. And when you get that southwest push, as the center gets inland here, you get that southwest push. That is going to be when the water is going to come rushing in here on the east side of the bay, and it's going to happen fast. I can't stress how quickly that water is going to come up and overtake these low-lying coastal areas here in northeast portions of Appalachia Bay.
Yeah. Just saw it on the live cam. That's all headed that direction.
Let me pull up a radar while we're on here.
Yeah. Yeah. That eye, earlier, it looked like it got pretty large, but maybe see how it looks now. If it's starting to tighten up, if the skaters bringing the arms in, so to speak. pretty consistent in that loop right there.
Yeah, you can see we have a much better defined eye than what we've been dealing with. Maybe a little lopsided, but one of the things. So here's Tampa. So
That's why that cam, you see that squall moving. Now that's probably what we were seeing on that camera.
Yeah, I believe that cameras aren't that Bay Bridge is right in this region right here.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, they're getting a nasty squall right there. But
Yep.
this is about as close as the hurricane's going to be to Tampa. So they're probably getting their worst of the conditions right now in the Tampa Bay area. And then you can see kind of heading up in this general direction up here towards Tallahassee,
Yep.
maybe a little east of there. So it is this area over here from Cedar Key to Steinhatchee up towards Perry, which is exactly where Debbie went in back in August, and then up over towards Madison and these areas. Luckily, not a there's people that live over here, but it's not the type of population concentration you have, say, in southern Florida or Southwest Florida. So that's maybe a little bit of helpful news. Interestingly enough, I'm going to zoom out and look at, we're talking
Look at
about
all
the
that
flooding
rain.
here. Look at
Yeah.
all of the heavy rain.
And that's just
That
the pre-soak. That's just the
this is
pre-soak.
this is interesting. I mean, we have this stalled front,
The
and you have the
trough.
moisture peeling off, and you have the upper dynamics of this low over here to the west. And this is what we call a predecessor rainfall event, and it's a fancy word for you get a lot of rain out ahead of the actual tropical system coming in. And so this is the big concern. It is going to rain and rain and rain, and then here comes the tropical system up on top of it, and the flooding is going to be really, really bad. I just, when you're reading some of the wording, potentially the worst flooding since 1921 in Asheville, North Carolina, potential records on some of the rivers in these areas. I wouldn't necessarily compare this to Harvey on the rainfall, but the problem is you run it up in these mountains and it can be really, really bad. The water moves very fast. It's not like flooding on the Gulf Coast where it kind of sits. Topography and terrain focuses that water and it moves it very quickly. And you can kind of see here the system running right up against the west side of the upper trough, and so it's kind of a sharp cutoff here to the west. So rolling from about Atlanta down towards Panama City and east of that is pretty much where all the rain's going to be. Interestingly enough, not a whole lot of banding across Florida this afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though that wind field is pretty wide, not everybody is getting the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the sun maybe help mixing down some of those stronger winds aloft, because there's not a lot of banding over here.
Yeah.
Which is, I wouldn't say it's atypical. Looking further north, some of the squalls are further up the coast around South Carolina coast. But this system's been kind of wrapping in dry air at times, and you kind of got a slug, I guess, up through here right now.
Yeah.
But the inner core has really insulated itself now from the dry air. You can see we have a very clearly defined eye wall wrapping all the way around. There's no dry air impinging into that eye wall, maybe occasionally. And there's these little notches in the eye wall now. You can see this little notch right here. And these are little mesovortices. And what that is a little spin in the eye wall where the difference between the calm center and the really strong winds in the eye wall can spin up little vortices in the eye wall. And you tend to see that in your stronger hurricanes. So that's probably what we're seeing. This is, I don't know, this eye looks about 30 miles across or so. That's a big diameter eye coming up to the coast. So we'll see. It's coming.
Now, I know earlier today they had several tornado watches and warnings. Do we have anything with current watches and warnings on it, or I don't?
I don't know if this shows warnings.
No, I think we'd have to go to NWS, but it's they're so brief usually, but there was one that was just for an extended amount of time, and I think it was just because the squall that was sort of training over the area. But yeah, yeah, I wouldn't think so. I mean, like you said earlier, most of the heavier bands are there just going in around Tampa and then in the Panhandle area. So those have probably expired. They were a few hours earlier, but still a threat. Tornadoes always a threat, of course, with hurricanes. And now we're taking
Yeah.
a live look at, courtesy of YouTube, taking a live look at Siesta Beach. And Jeff, have you been in that area doing surveys? Do you know that area?
I have not. I'm not 100% sure what Siesta Key is. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is north of Tampa, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's definitely. I looked at that camera earlier, and it's definitely picked up
No,
more.
no, it's not. It's south of Tampa. It's down around the Sarasota area. So
Okay.
this,
Yeah.
this isn't surprising. This is when you get south of Tampa, you have these broad, flat beaches, right, that extend, a football field, maybe a little bit further out into the Gulf of Mexico. And so this is, I would say this is probably a foot or two of storm surge coming up over those broad beaches. So it's covering the beach. You can see the lifeguards staying there. It's not overly deep, and then you usually reach some sort of a seawall of something. Maybe a couple 3 feet high. That's a road or a break. And so most of this is the coastal flooding on the beach side of any thing, and then as you get a little bit further inland, you may get some of those low lying roads where the water kind of comes up on, but. This is not, I wouldn't say this is substantial storm surge flooding. This is a couple feet or so. You can see the winds there, probably 40, 45, maybe 50 miles an hour. And again, this is probably the worst that this location is going to see south of Tampa. Again, the center is kind of passing north. So your wind is probably going to start to veer. Well, let's look at the odds real quick and see if the wind, yeah, you're starting to see. So the wind's parallel to the coast. And as the center comes up, the wind's going to turn more to the southwest. And when that happens, that's going to push that Gulf of Mexico water more
Yeah.
toward the coast. So right now,
Yeah.
the wind's kind of blowing along the coast, and then we'll force the wind to the southwest or south-southwest, and that'll push the water onto the coast. So you'll probably get some more water level rise here in this area this evening, and even into Tampa Bay. Your maximum water level rise in Tampa Bay will come when the wind comes out of the southwest.
Right.
And I don't think that's going to happen until probably after 8 o'clock tonight. And then it could be, it's going to rise pretty quick in there. Again, we're still expecting 5 to 8 feet of storm surge down here above normally dry ground. That's potential. If we get up around 8 feet, that would be a record for the Tampa Bay area. I haven't seen that level of storm surge in Tampa Bay since 1921, the hurricane of 1921. So it's been a long, long time. It's not going to be devastating storm surge, but there's definitely going to be areas in the metro area that will flood when you get up around 8 feet or so.
Yeah. Jeff, on one of those YouTube cameras, do we have a live shot of Key West, the southernmost point? I was looking at that. There it is right there. Yeah. I wonder um, if they're getting those southwest winds yet, because they're the furthest south of the eye right now.
Yeah, I think they're still south. It doesn't matter as much down at, yeah, well, a little
Yep.
bit south southwest.
Yep.
It doesn't matter as much down here since they're completely surrounded by water. So
Right.
even if your wind's out of the southeast or the southwest, it's you're getting water here, and the to some degree the water can move through the keys, so it's not like it's coming up to the Florida coast and the land is stopping it. The water can push through some of these breaks here, and so you don't really get a big storm surge down here. What you end up getting, which is exactly what the camera is showing, you get this wave action. You can see they've probably been dealing with this water level down there since yesterday, I imagine. I think I saw this camera yesterday down there, and the waves are about the same. They've sort of been in sort of a steady state in the lower keys. They're getting brushed. You're not going to get really big wave action through here getting brushed like this, and for the most part, it's relatively shallow. So, I mean, just looking at the waves, they look impressive when they hit the wall there. But we're probably talking 2 or 3, maybe 4 foot waves crashing into the seawall there, and that's about what you get down in the Keys, unless you get a much more direct impact there.
Yeah.
This is Clearwater, so this is up north of the Tampa area, kind of on the beach, on the Gulf beaches, and so you can see the difference between Clearwater here and what we saw down at Sarasota. So that's what the beach looks like down at Sarasota, that wide, broad, shallow beach that extends way out. And down there at Siesta Key, this is all underwater, and we haven't seen that up here at Clearwater yet. We haven't got the push up here further to the north.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's coming, but yeah, that's what Sarasota used to look like a few hours ago. But yeah, it is definitely coming. Yeah, so this is well, Tampa's cleaned up. I guess that squall's made it through, but still, you see those whitecaps coming over the bridge there. And then that top left image, it's pretty quiet harbor, but I'm not making out where that is exactly.
It's a Gasparillo Marina in Placida, Florida. I'm
Hmm.
not sure where that is, but you can see,
The water's up.
there's
Yeah.
water up over the docks here. This is pretty common of what we're seeing.
Hmm.
If this is up in the Appalachian Bay Area, I don't know, but this, it wouldn't surprise me if this is the type of flooding you're seeing up in Appalachian Bay right now. Cedar Key, St. Mark's, over towards Apalachicola. This is 1 to 2 feet. This is going to get horrible as it gets into tonight. You're talking add 15 feet on top of that, and that's what we're going to be looking at tonight up in Appalachian Bay. So not quite sure where this is located in Florida.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the camera site is here on the bottom left. It doesn't have a.
Yeah, it's not labeled. It's not labeled. What is that top left hand again, Jeff?
It's Gasparillo Marina in Placida, Florida. Placida.
Okay. L-A-C.
The Siesta Key there again. This is that big, broad beachfront that's just underwater now. Not surprising. This is probably a foot to 3 feet of storm surge coming in, and again you can kind of see the winds now with the palm trees here blowing a little bit more toward the shoreline. So that's going to start that kind of push of water, greater push of water there toward the coast. And I'm interested now. I want to go down here and see if there's a tide gauge. There's a tide gauge pretty close, well south of Sarasota. Let's take a look at it.
Yeah, that Placida, that's south of Tampa. It's between Tampa and Fort Myers.
Okay, so it's right about this area, and these areas had higher water levels this morning. They almost got up to 3 feet, and currently right now about 2.1. So that's what 2.2 feet of water looks like on the beachfront. It doesn't take a lot to cover the beach.
Does not, no.
But for the most part, I would say a lot of this is, so looking at Tampa Bay, I'd say a lot of this is nuisance flooding. There's some streets underwater, there's some beach fronts underwater. Yeah, that tide is rising in Tampa Bay now up to 1.6 feet. So
Hmm.
it's not the devastating surge right now on the coast of Florida that we're expecting later tonight. As you get further up to the north, and later this evening, let me see what the Swanee River here is doing. Yeah, interesting. This morning they got up around 1.9.
Yeah,
They're
got up there
coming.
pretty
They're
good.
coming out now.
Yeah, pretty good. Hmm.
So yeah, it's and this is exactly what we expected. The impacts working their way from south to north up the Florida West Coast, and as we get towards sunset tonight, that's when things are going to really go downhill in this area of the state. And so, if you look at some of these cameras here now and you're like, oh, it doesn't look that bad. No, they're getting brushed. These areas on the west coast of Florida, Fort Myers and Sarasota and Tampa, they're getting brushed by the tropical storm force winds. They're getting brushed by the storm surge. The water's coming in. And it will get worse. The storm surge will get worse in these areas as you go into the evening when you get that push from the southwest. But this is not, do not think this is what's going to happen up in Appalachian Bay. It is going to be much, much worse up in Appalachian Bay when the core of that hurricane comes into the coast.
Yeah, and at night to make matters worse. Got a question here in the chat, Jeff, from Joe, and it's a track question. He's asking if this storm's going to turn back in the Gulf, and the short answer is no. But maybe we could just pull up the track again, since some folks may have joined later, and there it is. You can see Where the position is at 5 o'clock Thursday in the wind field, almost covering the entire state of Florida. Hurricane warnings in that Big Bend area that Jeff was just talking about, tropical storm warnings all the way around Florida, with the exception of a small part of the Panhandle up to Georgia and South Carolina. And there's the track, still a hurricane. My goodness, still a hurricane as it enters Georgia, still a tropical storm by tomorrow afternoon in Tennessee. I mean, just to even say those two words together, tropical storm in Tennessee, is unusual. But then it just kind of stalls as a depression over the weekend, and continues to drop a lot of rain as it gets wrapped up into that trough that is already there. So lots of moisture, lots of rain there in that part of the country.
And let me pull up that inland extent of the warnings. It takes a little bit more time to generate this graphic, so it usually comes out about 30 past the hour after the advisory comes out. So we've just got the new graphic up, and you can see the inlet. Everything in blue here is tropical storm warning. And you're talking eastern, southeastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, the entire state of South Carolina and Georgia, eastern Alabama, and virtually the entire state of Florida. So again, this isn't just a Florida hurricane. I hope people to the north of this understand that. And you get these hurricane warnings almost getting up now to Atlanta.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, this is the red is hurricane warning. Atlanta's about right there, so just south of Atlanta, maybe a county or two. Uh, the potential for sustained, 75-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, this is just, you haven't seen this in Atlanta since Opal in 1995. This would be the last time you've seen something like this come through there. And I know it did a lot of damage up there, and this one's going to do a lot of damage up there too.
Yeah, and just for those, Jeff just mentioned the term sustained winds, and what a sustained wind is when we're talking about hurricane force winds, it has to be sustained for at least 1 minute. And you might think, well, 1 minute, that's not very long. Well, 75, 74 plus mile an hour winds for a minute can do a lot of damage, a lot of damage. So, and that's at 75. I mean, even less than that, tropical storm force winds at 40 miles per hour plus can do a lot of damage. And you can see how much area that covers. So yeah, that is pretty incredible that the hurricane force winds are going to extend that far into Georgia, and with all the trees there and with the Appalachian Mountains, as far as the rain is concerned, yeah, it's going to be a mess. This is definitely not just Florida's problem and Florida's storm.
So Scott, this is from Pinellas County, which is the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area, and they're saying that all bridges in Pinellas County are going to be shut down, including the Howard Franklin Bridge. We were just showing that
Thank goodness.
right here. So they're closing this down. Probably why there's no traffic. And then Florida Department of Transportation will be closing all bridges at 6 o'clock this evening to the barrier islands. And so that's it. Your opportunity to get off of these barrier islands and to get out of that storm surge area is closing very quick. 6 o'clock Eastern time is 30 minutes from now. So you have 30 minutes to get off those barrier islands, or you're not getting off. So you have to move now if you're in these evacuation areas, and you got to get out of those areas.
Yep, last call. It's time to go. There it is. See, see some pretty good tops there on that last loop there on the east side of the eye wall and kind of northwest side of the eye wall.
Yeah, it's going to town. Let's see if the recons said anything recently. It's going to town out there. Nope, we haven't got another pass in there. Let me make sure we're not getting something else. Nope, 952 is the last center drop that we had from the plane. So I guess we got another. It looks like we have another plane maybe coming in now.
I think there's been a couple in there for most of the day today.
Yeah, there's nothing at a there's nothing in a yeah, this plane's heading back. they did the center fix and they're heading back. So we'll have to wait for the next one to get in there. It's on its way, but
Yeah.
it's not by the center yet. So it's I suspect in the next 30 minutes or so we'll get a new drop in the center and see what we're at. But we're at 952, and that was a 7 millibar drop in 90 minutes. So hopefully it's not continuing at that rate. If that is the case, we're in some big trouble as
Yeah.
this thing comes up, because that's a pretty fast rate of deepening. And just kind of extrapolating this out now, you're 4 to 6 hours probably from the core of this getting in here. So things are going to go downhill. I can't stress enough that it's not bad in Appalachian Bay right now, but it's going to go down very quick with the wind and the surge and all of that. It's coming in the next couple of hours up here.
Yeah. The good news, at least the east side of Florida, but there are definitely a few bands over there, but it's not like Florida is completely covered up. They are with the wind, but not so much the convection right now. But it could drag some bands, like hurricanes do a lot of times. They'll drag some bands with them, so they're not completely out of the woods as far as rain for the next day or so. So
Well, it's interesting you mentioned on
yeah, there it is.
the IR, and you can see these
Mm,
big thunderstorms erupting in the eye and all the lightning, and
yeah,
that's a red flag on intensification. When you tend to see that amount of lightning in the eye wall, hurricanes don't tend to have a lot of lightning,
yeah,
but when you see that amount of lightning in the eye wall, that is a big red flag that this thing is
yeah,
at least trying to really intensify. I mean, this is just really not what you want to see as this thing comes up to the coast. I mean, it still has time. It still has another 4 to 6 hours before it gets up to the coast. And at the rate it's going, it could definitely be a Category 4 hurricane here. Not, we're not we're not splitting here. If it's Category 3 or Category 4, it's bad. If it's 100, if it's 120 or 130, this is going to be bad. And I don't want people to, oh, it didn't make it to Category 4, so that's not the situation. This is a big monster size hurricane coming up to the coast. One of the biggest we've ever seen in the Gulf of Mexico with respect to the size of the wind field, on par with Hurricane Ike and Hurricane Ivan. Folks in the Florida Panhandle remember Hurricane Ivan back in 2004, 20 years ago,
yeah,
that devastated the Florida Panhandle. And this thing is coming, and regardless if it's 120, 130, Category 3, Category 4, there is going to be very, very significant impacts as this comes up to the coast. And you just don't want to see this on the radar, especially with the lightning as this thing comes up to landfall.
yeah. We got another question in the chat, Jeff. Why did this hurricane grow so fast? And that's something we've been talking about. Gosh, it feels like a week now. I mean, this thing just started as, a very disorganized system. And I was really impressed with the way the models performed on this before it actually had a closed low. But as part of the Central American gyra, and as we talked about earlier, they can get storms spinning off of that large gyra, that large low pressure area just spinning over Central America. In fact, we had a storm spin off in the Eastern Pacific, Hurricane John, and the answer to your question, though, is why did it grow so fast? We knew it was just going to be moving in this favorable environment with warm water, which the Gulf has been warm for a long time, and low wind shear. And that's what it was fighting a lot down in the Caribbean. It was fighting that wind shear. But as the models showed, they expected this thing. We were looking at intensity forecasts several days ago of this thing possibly becoming a Category 3, Category 4, and that is verifying now.
Yeah, the models have done really well with this, and we'll see. There were some pretty extreme solutions up here in some of the regional hurricane models. Pressure down around 910 and 920 millibars. I don't know if we're going to get to that. I hope we don't get to that.
No.
So we'll see. But the global models, the GFS and the European and the Icon, again, have done fairly well with this, and there's been very little deviation in the track. And so, this is one of those storms you can't say you didn't know it was coming or the track changed. The track has not changed
No.
really, really much since the thing formed as a PTC down in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's been honed in on the Florida Big Bend and Appalachia Bay area since the first advisory came out. And so you can't say the track changed and you didn't have time, you didn't know it was coming. The warnings have been here, I don't know, since Monday we've been talking about this. Sunday. It's now Thursday evening, afternoon, and so people had 4 days to get ready for this, and I certainly hope that people in the Florida Panhandle and that Big Bend area took those precautions and at least evacuated the coastal areas. They got the higher ground. In Florida, cases in Florida, especially in this area, you don't have to go very far. You just have to get to higher ground. And there's some topography, in this part of Florida. You actually get some elevation rise, and so you don't have to drive, like some people do in Texas, 300-400 miles. You just have to go 20 or 30 miles, and you're perfectly safe from the storm surge. And that's what we really try to get across is you don't have to drive to Atlanta or someplace like that. You just got to get away from the water. And there's a little more topography in Florida than I think some people think there is.
Yeah. Got another question just off Helene topic for a minute. They joined late, but they were asking about they're asking about the yellow hatched area, the newly formed yellow hatched area in the Caribbean. We did talk about that earlier, just briefly mentioned it, just popped up today. And that system right now has a 20% chance of development over the next 7 days. So not much to say about it at this time, but we'll be covering that and talking about it here on Weather Insights in another briefing in days to come. And that's about all I have on that one. I don't know. Have you looked at that one much, Jeff, the new system?
I haven't. I know there's some guidance down here that is showing some activity, and some of the ensembles are showing some activity. It kind of looks like this does end up in the Gulf of Mexico again. Again, any development down here in the Western Caribbean would be not before, say, the middle of next week. And so we're not anticipating anything before that, and then we'll just have to see what we're doing out, what the upper air pattern is. Unfortunately, this does look like something that may meander up into the Gulf and potentially threaten the Gulf Coast. But again, we're talking way out in time. We'll get another named storm out of this over here before we have something develop in the Caribbean. But very interesting. Finally, here, the end of September, we almost have 3 storms on the map. Kind of what we thought August was going to be, but it didn't pan out that way. And so I say we're sort of making up for August right now, but it's not necessarily the numbers; it's where they hit. And you can have a storm like Isaac out here that adds you a number, but you have a storm like Helene in the Gulf of Mexico that really, really matters. So it's where they hit that matters.
Yeah. And then we of course had Beryl too, category 5 across the Lesser Antilles, and then doing quite a bit of damage to Texas and Houston metro area with and ended up being more of a windstorm. But that's exactly right. The quantity doesn't matter. It's where they're going. And right now, all the focus is on Helene. So hopefully this thing, we'll get through quickly. And but it is going to be catastrophic, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is going to be this is definitely not what you wanted to see coming up this evening. We I think we had a little bit of hope early this morning when the structure wasn't as well defined that maybe it wasn't going to develop as much today, but clearly what the airplane has been showing out there, and now with the satellite and the radar showing, unfortunately this is going to make a run for that higher end potential that we were kind of talking about all week. And I can't stress enough, this water push is coming up here. It's coming, and it's going to be there in the next 3 or 4 hours. That water is going to rise very, very fast to levels that you're not going to be able to survive. I mean, we're talking well into second stories of structures with big waves crashing into those structures. And there's a handful of small towns over here on the east side of Appalachia Bay, from Cedar Key, I think, up to Keaton Beach, Horseshoe Bend or Horseshoe Beach. I don't anticipate there being a lot left of those towns after this moves through. This is going to be a devastating blow to this area. And as a matter of fact, I was just checking on something in this area. There's never been, since 1851, never a Category 4 or 5 landfall in this part of Florida.
Wow.
So if this does get up to Category 4, it will be unprecedented in its own. That there's just never been. And this area of Florida does not get tropical storms and hurricanes that often. It's been kind of a magnet here over the last couple of years. We had Michael over here near Panama City. We had Adelia come up here last year. We had Debbie come through here in August, and here we go with Helene coming in. But historically, going back to 1851, there's very few hurricanes that come into this area. And you can kind of see it has to take this kind of track that it comes up, and then it bends back to the northeast. And really, the only time of year you're going to see probably something like that is this time of year, late September into October, where the troughs come down and kind of pull us back to the north and east. And then to get it into this little cove area is even more difficult. And so, this is one, folks sitting up there and like, well, I went through Adelia and I went through Debbie and I went through the superstorm of 93, and I've lived through all my life. Yeah, absolutely, you have. You've lived there all your life and you haven't seen this, and you are going to see it tonight. This is going to be one of those that people talk about for a long time in this area, kind of like a generational type storm event for this part of Florida. So it's going to be bad. And kind of like we always, we kind of fear what the sun's going to bring tomorrow morning, what the sunrise is going to bring. It's the pictures are not going to be good in this part of Florida.
Yeah. Jeff, let's take one more question from the chat, and then wrap this portion up. We'll likely have more coverage tomorrow, as Helene is going to be hanging around still, and not sure if we'll live stream tomorrow, but we'll have some sort of posting and possibly live stream. But let's see, we have a question from Justin. What time and why do you, or I'm sorry, let's see, what time, I think he meant when, what time and when do you, or what time and what, I think is what time and what do you think will be the peak surge in Tampa?
Oh, in Tampa. It'll be this evening for sure. So let's look at Tampa real quick. Where's my surge stuff at? Here we go. It'll definitely be this evening. I would say, I think the high tide tonight is around 1 a.m. Friday morning in Tampa Bay, between 1 and 2 a.m. That will probably be the maximum peak. So you're going to get this onshore push here in the next couple of hours, starting as the center moves up north. The wind's going to switch around to the southwest, and that's going to start funneling that water into the bay. And then the high tide is going to come in, so that's going to exacerbate that water level rise in the bay. So your peak is going to be, I'd say, between midnight local time and 2 a.m. local time in the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area, and then that will be it. You'll see the winds come down, the water will come down towards sunrise tomorrow morning. So tonight, and if we're talking, some of these low areas do get up 8 feet above ground level in a single story house. That's getting deep. That's neck deep water, or higher in a single story, first story home. So I really hope people have listened. The focus has been up here, like always, where's the landfall going to be? But we've been seeing for days now that this is far reaching impacts, and you can't sleep on 8 feet of water level in Tampa Bay. I don't know if we'll get 8 feet. We might. That's probably the worst case scenario. But even 6 feet, I mean, flooding is going to happen. You're going to have water in homes. You're going to have water in structures. You're going to have water in buildings. You're going to inundate things in downtown. This will be worse than Tropical Storm Ada a few years ago. This will be worse than Idalia that happened. You're going to get, storm surge into this area, and it's potentially going to be, life threatening in around the Tampa Bay area. And again, it's going to be in the dark. Between midnight and 2 a.m. is going to be that maximum level down there.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, Great stuff as always, sir. Thank you very much. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to the Weather Insights YouTube channel, turn on those notifications, and stay in touch with what's going on in the tropics. And we will see you again tomorrow.